Numbers, chapter 1 through 36. From Sinai's hush came the calling, enthralling the heart still beating. Moses sternly counted all soldiers, forging ranks before God's throne. While each tribe stood there pleading, unheeding the battles still meeting, tribes of Reuben, Simeon, Judah marched on desert sands of bone. So their muster raised a nation, from the mighty seeds God had grown. Numbered souls with arms of valor marched beneath that great cloud of stone. Banners rose with daybreak turning, concerning the lines still burning. Tribes encircled holy ground, each one humbly assigned a grand tale. Judah first in triumph learning, yearning for tokens of burning, east and south, the tribes stood watchful, while the stern Levites formed a veil. In their midst, the holy tent, where God's presence ever stilled each wail, marked with bold banners, tribes would gather, each confiding under hail. Levi's line stood firmly listening, glistening in vows so heeding, they were given sacred tasks, to guard the tent at God's side. Aaron's sons in duty's christening, witnessing the law still bleeding. Gershon, Kohath, Merari, each clan was chosen to guide. In consecration's hush they labored, no mortal could then hide, for the holy must stay spotless or pay the cost in mortal pride. Kohath bore the holiest burden, certain no slip would be chilling. Hidden under layers of cloth, the ark was carried with care. Priests prepared each sacred curtain, uncertain but trusting and willing. Ash and ember, polished gold, no stranger's hand must dare. Each soul moved with solemn hush, for God's glory lingered there. Levites learned the weight of worship, mindful of the charge they bear. Through the camp came dire warnings, adorning each heart with fearing. Unclean souls were cast outside, that Israel might remain pure. Restitution for all wrongings, belonging to justice so searing. If one strayed in hidden shadows, the priest would watch and be sure. By the bitter water's curse, the truth would soon endure. Sin unmasked beneath the heavens, that none might falsehood lure. Nazarites with heads unshaven, engraven in vows so keeping, they would drink no wine nor taste the harvest of the vine's shell. Holiness through days so graven, enslaven the flesh from sleeping, hair uncut, a sign of promise, dedicated by God's spell. When their vow had reached its close, the shears in calm would fell, locks cast into sacred flame, a farewell to that solemn spell. Princes came with offerings gleaming, redeeming their tribal yearning, silver plates and bowls of measure, rams and bulls for each feast. Day by day, in order teeming, beaming devotion still burning, Judah first, then Issachar, Zebulun next released the beast. 12 full days of consecration, each leader a humble priest, altar anointed, tabernacle bright, his presence never ceased. Aaron lit the holy lamps in camps of golden glowing, 7 flames before the Lord, shining hope across the night. Levites cleansed in solemn stamps, their tasks and vows all knowing, sprinkled, shaved, presented forth, accepted in holy sight. Given wholly to the priesthood, they served with reverent might, bearing burdens, guarding borders, in worship's austere height. Passover came in desert quiet, the diet of lamb and bitter. Some were unclean, yet yearned to keep this feast of Israel's birth. God allowed a second rite, no slight to his law would flitter. In month the next, they ate the bread and walked with solemn worth. A cloud by day, a fire by night, his sign upon the earth, they would move when glory lifted, abiding in holy mirth. 2 silver trumpets shining, entwining the call to rally. 1 blast gathers heads of tribes, 2 blasts call all to the door. Judah leads the march designing, combining each rank and alley. Levi in center, bearing ark, no man could wander sore. Rise, O Lord, cried Moses onward, let foes retreat once more. When they camped again at evening, return, O Lord, he'd implore. Complaints rose up at Taberah, a terror of hunger growing. Manna fell like dew at dawn, but longing turned hearts to grief. They recalled the fish of Egypt, that bondage seemed worth knowing. Moses groaned beneath the burden, despairing for some relief. God sent quail in swirling thousands, yet plague would strike like a thief. Caution stands, be not ungrateful, or wrath shall find unbelief. Aaron and Miriam whispered, they blistered with words of daring, has the Lord not spoken through us? Envy was their sole cry. Moses, meek in spirit, listened, though dissonant tongues kept tearing. A pillar of cloud then summoned them forth, anger flaming on high. Miriam turned leprous, white as snow, no place to flee or deny. Yet Moses pled for mercy, and 7 days would pass her by. Spies were chosen, scouting promise. In calmness they trod the Canaan, clusters of grapes so mighty, land of milk and honey fair. Yet 10 hearts shrank, forging grimness, their boldness began to wane. But Caleb and Joshua stood with hope and challenged the nation to dare. God is with us, do not tremble. They urged them not to scare. Still the seeds of doubt were planted, the faithful would be rare. All the people raised their voices, choices marred by crying, would we died in Egypt's hold or perished out in the sand. They forgot the mighty wonders, thunder of God's trying. Caleb, Joshua tore their garments, pleading for the promised land. In fury, God pronounced their doom. Through wilderness they'd stand, 40 years they'd roam in circles, until the faithful took command. Offerings for sins neglected, corrected by holy teaching, unintentional fault might pass if atonement's flame was lit. Those who brazenly disrespected, rejected God's righteous reaching, were cut off from the people's midst, their lineage forced to quit. One who gathered wood on Sabbath was stoned in final pit. Thus tassels soon were woven, to remind each heart not to split. Korah rose with men of might, contrite no longer their fashion. Levites spurned the appointed line, contending for higher role. Moses prayed as wrath took flight, the night of God's hot passion. Earth was riven, swallowing rebels, the sign of vengeance whole. Incense swiftly quenched a plague, with Aaron bridging the whole. 14,000 fell in terror as rebellion took its toll. A rod for each tribe was chosen, a token of rightful flower. Aaron's staff by dawn displayed fresh blossoms from holy hand. Proof enough that God had spoken, unbroken was priestly power. None should murmur at his choice or test his burning brand. Trembling voices cried in fear, we perish under command. But the budding staff brought solace to unify the land. Priests and Levites bore the weight, the gate of the sacred dwelling. They received the offerings pure, a share for all their need. No inheritance was their fate, but the Lord in grace compelling, tithes from Israel's yield bestowed to nourish them with speed. Thus a covenant of salt was set, no layman might dare plead. The priesthood's charge was certain, God's holiness decreed. A red heifer outside the camp to stamp the water of cleansing, its ashes stored for purifying all who touch the dead with hands. Sprinkle thrice by law's own lamp, no cramp in the rites so fencing. Unclean souls must wait 7 days, abiding in strict demands. Death defiles if left alone, so wisdom thus expands. God's commands keep life from chaos in dusty desert lands. At Kadesh, Miriam breathed her last, the past in sorrow living. No water for the thirsty throng, they quarreled yet again. God told Moses, speak to the rock, but shock and anger giving. He struck it twice. Though water flowed, he faced a grievous pen. Aaron would soon ascend Mount Hor, where breath would leave him then. Israel mourned their faithful priest, whose watch had guided men. Canaan's king attacked the host, engrossed in fierce warring. Israel vowed complete destruction, devoting spoils to flame. But hearts grew weary on the road, complaining no more tarring. Serpents struck with burning bites, a plague of poison came. A bronze snake raised on a pole saved those who gazed from shame. Thus they pressed toward Moab's border, singing at Beer's well of fame. Balak trembled, seeing Israel's tide. Wide was his dread rising. He summoned Balaam from afar, cursed them for gold untold. God first forbade his wrongful stride, then tried his heart by surprising. A donkey spoke on the narrow path, halting the prophet so bold. Angel's sword gleamed fierce in light. Balaam felt a warning's cold. On Moab's heights he stood constrained to speak what God foretold. 7 altars, rams and bulls, he pulls at the strings of heaven. Balak waits for cursing words to damn the children fair. Yet Balaam's mouth with blessing full, no ill could thus be given. God is not man to break his vow. Behold their bannered heir. No spell or omen can stand strong against the Lord's care. Israel rises like a lion, in might beyond compare. Balaam turned his face to watch, a match for the Spirit speaking, saw the tribes in valleys spread, divine hush on his tongue. Visions soared beyond his scotch of greed or worldly seeking. How lovely are your tents, O Jacob, in song he softly sung. A star from Jacob soon would rise, the scepter's rule swung. Moab, Edom, foes would bow, as prophecy was young. Moab's daughters lured men astray, the day of wanton sharing. Israel feasted at pagan shrines, bound to Baal of Peor. In righteous wrath the plague gave way, thousands died despairing. Phinehas in a jealous strike speared sin through its core. Thus God's wrath was turned aside, a covenant made once more. Zeal for truth stands as a sword, unyielding to foreign lore. Another census on Moab's plains, the strains of sorrow mending. All who'd wandered in that desert died, save Caleb and brave Josh. New lists formed from younger veins, the promise still ascending. Tribes prepared to claim their lands, no giant could them quash. Levites kept their separate call, no fields for them to wash. Yet God would be their portion sure and posh. Zelophehad's daughters stood their ground, profound in bold pleading. Our father left no sons behind, must his name fade away? God upheld their rightful sound, inheritance thus conceding. A father's portion might pass to daughters if no sons hold sway. Then Moses glimpsed the land far off, soon parted from life's day. Joshua rose by God's decree to shepherd them on their way. Daily offerings, morning, night, alight with flour and pouring. Sabbath sacrifices doubled, each month began with wine. Passover kept in hallowed rite, unleavened bread adoring. Trumpets of joy at harvest dawn, the new grain was divine. All these feasts proclaim the Lord, in measured gifts so fine. Israel learned in rhythmic praise to trust the sure design. Trumpets on the 7th month, in triumph they thronged for hearing. 10th day came atonement pure, each soul must humbly bow. Then tabernacles as they camped in booths, so persevering. 13 bulls the first day burned, decreasing day by vow. For a week they feasted on grace, devotion and solemn vow, concluding with a great assembly to seal the year somehow. Vows made swiftly must be kept, except by father or spouse, who might annul a woman's pledge if done in hearings day. Oaths are not lightly to be swept, nor left to random rouse. The Lord esteems each honest word, commands we watch and pray. If widow or divorce shall speak, no shield stands in her way. Thus the weight of mortal promise rings sternly on display. Midian lured the chosen host, at cost they stoked God's anger. Now vengeance fell by Moses' cry, the armies marched to war. Balaam fell by sword for boast, no ghost could shield his danger. Captives, spoils, and wealth were split, with tribute for the Lord. All who took a life must cleanse, let none defile the cord. Thus the camp stands purified, in truth's relentless cord. Reuben, Gad beheld the fields, yields for their flocks so vital. They asked to settle east of Jordan, far from Canaan's fight. Moses feared their slack would shield the dread of hearts now frightful, but they vowed to march in front, to seize the land with might. Only after conquering west would they claim their rightful site. Half-tribe Manasseh joined the pledge, in unity's shared right. Stages of their wanderings told, unfold the roads once taken, from Ramesses to Sinai's hush, from desert to desert wide. Aaron died on Hor so old the bold high priest was shaken. Then they pitched by Moab's plains, Jericho across the tide. God declared, drive out each foe, break idols, falsehood's pride. By lot the land would be bestowed, lest sin remain inside. Boundaries drawn from southern rim to dim the western ocean, north to Lebo Hamath's crest, east by Jordan's flow. Tribes would claim their land from him, no whim but sovereign notion. Reuben, Gad, half Manasseh had chosen to stay below. Eleazar, Joshua assigned each border so all might know. Canaan's breadth was marked by heaven, where covenant seeds would grow. Cities for the Levites stand, planned with wide green pasture, 6 of them as refuge halls for those who kill unplanned. Blood avenger roams the land, yet fairness must ensure. The assembly weighs each murder case, a trial in righteous hand. No ransom can for death atone, for blood must meet command. Purity of land is precious, upheld by heaven's demand. Zelophehad's daughters drew near, sincere to keep their dwelling. If they wed beyond their tribe, inheritance drifts away. So they married kin held dear, adhering to Moses' telling. Thus each tribe's portion was maintained, no border led astray. Numbers ends with promise bright, on Jordan's edge they pray. A chosen people, forged in trial, await their Canaan day.